That's recording.
Okay. This is not my job, it's the examiner.
Second grade.
See the timer?
Second grade.
Perfect, yeah.
10, 11.
Yeah, Michael will be happy that you helped. I'm gonna squeeze right past you.
All right, we'll save a spot for Meg. Is this all be good?
This is it.
Don't block it.
Makes me trouble.
She won't bite.
Okay, we're going to call to order regular session, and the first thing we'll do is the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, Steve.
Okay. 5.1, approval and or amendment of the board meeting agenda items for October 25th, 2017.
No modifications or amendments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Need an approval?
I move that we approve the board meeting agenda as presented.
A second if I wasn't here.
Yes.
Okay, second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes from the previous meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Right.
Motion carries.
That was for
Oh, that's for the agenda.
Yeah, that was for
The agenda. Okay, correspondence.
I have them. We're to the
It's all good, the minutes are good, I promise.
All right. Minutes are approved. How about that?
There we go.
We good? Okay, public comment? Reports, 9.1, second grade career presentation.
Please introduce Ms. Moore and Mrs. Nickel and the kids here, so take it away.
Okay.
You guys want to come up here now or you want to wait? Okay, so as you know, maybe we are working in some PLCs, positive learning communities, down at the elementary level. And an idea that our PLC had was to have classes come up and present units or activities that they're doing in their classrooms to kind of keep everybody in the loop. And an idea that we had a few years ago was to start this career unit. And what started that is when I asked a young man about 3 years ago what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he looked at me and said nothing. And I looked at him and I'm trying to, you know, say, what about a firefighter? What about a policeman? Give him some exciting ideas. And he goes, no. He goes, I'm just going to stay at home and play video games like that. And I'm like, okay, well, that kind of hurt my heart and didn't sit with us right. So here we are. We just kind of wanted to keep this idea going and give these kiddos some ideas and give them some hopes and get them thinking about the path that they need to take later on in life. And so with that, we've had some great people come into our classroom. This year we had a police officer, a physical therapist, a pastor, and a dental hygienist.
So, and with our career unit, we kind of try to tie it into Labor Day. We talk about what Labor Day is, the history of Labor Day, and we study that a little bit, and then we go into our career unit. And from that, we read lots of books on different careers. We bring in the presenters, like she said, a lot of them are parents. We try to include the parents in that. And we talk about, what kind of different education you might have to have, what kind of tools you may need to have for these different jobs. And one of the other things that we really talk with the kids is to start thinking about now, what do you like to do? What don't you like to do? And I kind of shared with them how I wanted to be a nurse until when the sight of blood made me want to pass out. So I had to decide I can't be a nurse. So, so to start thinking about those kinds of things. And so from that, then what we did is we made these posters. So this is our current year. and these are from the other years. And they just hold up a piece of, after we've done all of the information and stuff like that, then they decide what kind of career they may want to do. And so then we take a little chalkboard and we just write it on there, and then they hold it up. And then these are the different careers they want to do. And then we put these posters in our classroom, and so they can kind of see. And then kind of the last thing they do is they write a paper about what they want to do. And so that's why we have our 3 little special guys here, is they volunteered. So like we had kids volunteer first, and then we drew sticks from that. So we told them they'd have to present to adults, and these guys were very brave and excited. So we have these guys here that are going to tell you about what they want to do when they grow up. So Lillian, you want to start? This is Lillian.
My sister. When I grow up, I want to be a horse trainer. It will be a fun job because I can help people. I will need these tools for my job, a saddle and people. My job will be harder because of my mad horse. When I get my first paycheck, I will save it. That is why I want to be a horse trainer by Lillian Guido Chris.
Okay, second we have Ryan.
When I grow up, I want to be SWAT. It will be a fun job because you will train with guns. You will need these tools from the job, glass shields, and all kinds of guns. My job will be hard because training to do stuff like that. When I get my first paycheck, I will buy a big house for myself. That is why I want to be SWAT by Reinhold. When I grow up, I want to be a teacher. It will be a fun job because I like to organize, because I like school and see kids. I will need these tools for my job. School supplies, kids, network. My job will be hard because cooperating with difficult students and teaching. When I get my first paycheck, I will buy a house, decorations, and furniture. That is why I want to be a teacher by Maggie Mice.
I just know that in the future, teachers are making a lot more money.
We're proud of you guys. Good
Yeah,
job.
thank you so much for coming, you guys. You guys did a great job. Great job. Yes. So thank you for your time. We just wanted you guys to kind of know what's going on at the elementary school.
Sounds like a
Great
great
presentation.
presentation.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Nicole, was that one of my kids that wanted to stay at home?
I wasn't supposed to mention names.
No, we can follow up.
When I get there, she's there when I get there. She's the hardest working teacher in the world.
Thank you.
She has to say, you can go with it. But you guys can go down.
You guys want to stay or do you want to get out?
We're gonna go.
What is next? We're going to talk about state reports and go through data for those, and then
Because
we're
they
going to
have some
talk
funny
about
things to say. Thank you.
It'll go on the.
No, I want to go because I was telling them that I thought mine wasn't. So.
We just don't want to help their life.
No, it's okay. No, we would, but we got to get kiddos ready for bed. So.
Thank you guys very much for bringing Ryan.
I think so. Also, the state school report card.
Yeah, it's kind of on them.
Principals are going to chime in. Good job. Report cards and myself.
Congrats. Thank you so much.
I tried it out to make sure it would work.
Got it.
Hi. So if you don't know me, I'm Tara Counts. I'm the district test coordinator for Lake County School District. And a big part of my job is making sure that we take all of the state tests and all the grade levels here in the district. And then, of course, every year I compile all of our assessment data and bring it down to you guys so you can see how we did. So I'm going to talk about the 3 subject areas where we give state tests. We give a state test in English Language Arts, and that's the first subject area we'll cover. That test actually tests students in reading, writing, listening, and speaking, or not speaking, sorry, research. And then we do a math test, and then we also have a science test. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is participation. On the report cards, historically, we've always had a target of 94.5%, which just means we want at least 94.5% of our students to take that test. That target did remain the same this year, although as you guys probably know, we're not being rated on those report cards. We wouldn't have been penalized if we didn't meet that target for any reason, but my educated guess would be in the future, they're probably still going to be factoring that target in somehow when they do finally come out with the new rating system. The blue bars just show what percentage of students took the test in the elementary grade level. So as you can see, we were well above the target in 3rd through 6th grade. And then the red bar is just the state of Oregon and the percentage of students who took the test in those grade levels. Not only did we meet the target for all elementary grade levels, we were above the state average. So did a really good job for participation, which is good news because that means our results are accurate and valid. So looking at middle school and high school, a lot more of the same. We tested every single kid in 8th and 11th grade. We did have some opt-outs in the 7th grade. That's a new thing over the last 2 years. Parents can opt their students out of state assessments if they like. We haven't had that impact us too greatly yet, but it does impact us a little bit. That's why the 7th grade was a little bit lower, but still above the state average and met the target in every grade level. So now we're going to look at the English Language Arts results for the elementary grade levels, 3rd through 6th grade. 3rd grade is the first grade where they take this test, so they don't have results from 15-16, but last year when the 3rd graders took the English Language Arts test, 54.4% of those kids were proficient. The target we were aiming for that they came up with for the report cards was 57%, so they were just shy of that, really close. If you compare them to the state of Oregon, 45.2% of all of Oregon's 3rd graders who took the test were proficient. So even though we didn't quite hit that target, we were close and we still performed better than the state. 4th grade, we do have some results for 15-16. When they were 3rd graders, they took that test and we showed that 55.6% of those kids were proficient. It's fun to look at 15-16 and 16-17, but I just want you guys to keep in mind, it's not a perfect comparison because we have kids move in and out of the district in both years, so it's not the exact same sample of kids, but just to kind of give you an idea of where we were last year. This year,
Is it a difficult test?
the English Language Arts test, I mean, it's rigorous, it's challenging.
That way
It's aligned to the
target's
standards.
57%.
Well, the target is, you know, just a number they come up with, it goes up every single year. And so right now, they just sent out a thing, so in like, I think it's 2024, everybody's supposed to be at 80. So I don't know if that's gonna happen, but that's just what they have. And that might change because a lot of the hubbub about getting a new rating system was everybody felt like it relied too heavily on test results. And the report card isn't just test results, but if you look at the school report cards, it looks like it is because most of the data you see on there is related to test results. So hopefully, when the new rating system comes out, they'll still be using test results, but it won't be, it'll just be a little piece of the puzzle. So 4th graders, 51.8% of 4th graders were proficient. And at the state level, 47.7% were proficient, so we were above the state average there. Still didn't quite meet that target of 57%. 5th grade, 46.9% of the 5th graders were proficient on the English Language Arts test. Didn't meet the target, a little bit below the state average, but not a whole lot. 6th grade, 50.9% of students were proficient. A little bit below the state average, pretty much right on par with the way 6th graders were performing across the state on that test. And they had a little bit of a drop between 15-16 and 16-17, but again, that could be a result of that group becoming larger or smaller. In our district, we don't have a lot of kids, so when 5 kids move in or out, it does make a pretty big difference for percentage proficient. Moves us on to middle school, so 7th and 8th grade. 7th graders, they took the ELA test this year, 34.6% of the 7th graders were proficient. That was below the state average of 55.6%. Didn't quite get to the target of 57%, and there was a drop between 15-16 and 16-17. Eighth grade, saw some growth between 15-16 and 16-17. They went from 55.8% proficient to 58.3%, so that was good. They were also able to hit the target. They were the first grade that did. They were 58.3% and the target was 57. And they were above the state average, which was 54.7%.
Can we back up a second? I was just looking at comparing, so what I'm seeing here on this slide is that when they were in 6th grade is the blue, and this is tracking that individual class.
It's tracking
from
that,
15
yes,
to 17.
the only thing to note is that it doesn't factor in a kid that may have been enrolled with us in 15-16 who's no longer, or a new kid that came in, but yeah, for the most part, our kids that were here.
And so when you flip forward, right now it's at 34.6 when they're in 7th grade. And when you flip forward, last year's 7th graders were 55.8.
This was when they were 6th graders.
Well,
In 15-16 and 16-17 was the 34.6, so this is a different grade.
understand,
the
but
eighth
between
graders-
grade, the 8th grade last year, the blue is comparable to
Oh, I see what you're saying.
the
Well,
red of this year.
mhm.
So we've had a drop in that grade. Not only did they drop from one grade to the next grade, but the previous 7th graders did well, better than them as well.
I guess I'm not following you, sorry.
When this group moved from 6th grade to 7th grade,
When the 7th graders went from 6th to 7th grade, yeah, they
they
had a drop.
dropped.
Yep.
But between 7th grade classes, the 16, 17, or 15, 16, 7th grade class was better than this group too.
Yeah, jump up to it.
Because they were 55.
And by quite a bit, and that's a large class. The 7th grade class coming in, 27, 28 in a classroom, 6th grade. And sometimes, you know, like Tara said, if you have 3 or 4 kids, 5 or 6 kids, we're so small that it makes a big difference. But that's one of the things that our elementary school teachers are very concerned about is we have some very large classes. It would not surprise me to see the exact same thing when the 6th graders this year go up because there's 30 in a classroom right now.
Okay, so you're saying these
Eighth-
this year's 8th graders
Smaller class
is
size.
a smaller class than this year's 7th
Well,
graders?
Correct.
Or,
These
I know what
8th
that
graders are now
Freshmen.
freshmen.
Yes.
And there won't be new data for them until they're juniors. So this is all we'll have, and then, you know, then you have to ask yourself, is it comparable, the 8th grade data to the 11th grade?
Because then there's
There's
3
a
years
huge
that people
gap.
move in and out. So that group can look.
So we've got a pinch point then at the 7th grade, where large classroom sizes.
Yes and no. 7th graders, usually you see a drop in the middle school in ELA and sometimes math. Tara, correct me if I'm wrong, but when across the board, across the state, that's where you see dips generally is that middle school year.
Yeah.
we have 2 years of data now
On smarter balance, yes.
unbound, which is tough to make some comparisons, but at some point, we're gonna have to just compare 8th grade classes by year versus the 8th grade class, how they were 7th graders, and then 8th, and tracking them.
For like
But
grade.
just to see, you know,
Mhm.
what's happening in our 8th grade class, are we improving or dropping, or, you know what I'm getting at?
But you
We don't have enough data.
What you end up doing though, a little bit, Dustin, is you're comparing apples and oranges with different groups of kids. Because one group of kids, you know, if you have 4 or 5 kids that are outstanding students, bring those averages, I mean, they can bring the average up. If you have a number of like a high number of students who maybe are special needs kids or that kind of stuff, and they test, that can bring that average down significantly. Just 4 or 5 kids make that difference.
But it'd be interesting to see that.
Yeah.
And if there's a spike or dip somewhere,
Yep.
identify why is that? You know, is it because this group of students or this class is 50 kids and this one's 70? You know, or,
Or
you
there's
know,
some
do we have an influx of kids that are English language learners, or what, where,
And some of
why
that-
are, what's
some of that
driving
will-
that?
Some of that will also be driven by instructors. Have we had high turnover in that area, for instance? And I think you'll see that when we get to middle school math, that we've had some turnover. I mean, not for anybody's fault, but, and so you'll see how that impacts those kids on their testing.
So that's just some of the hidden background stuff that kind of interests me, is why,
Yeah, back,
what's going on with the organization as a whole,
Yep.
or in a community that's driving kind of some of the things that we're seeing.
Which is exactly why we get the data we do, because we want our decisions to be data-driven and not just hunches that we have.
Yeah.
When we see the data and we see a concern over time, like you're saying, then we need to start either changing our curriculum, the way we instruct, or whatever. So that's exactly why we have
We
it.
just, unfortunately, by the time we start getting decent data, then
They
something
change the
changes.
test.
They change the test.
And we can't ever get, I guess that's my number one complaint, is we can't ever get a long enough string of data to make valid comparisons.
I've been in the district 24 years, and they've changed the standardized test 5 times. In the 24 years I've been in the district.
So you, at
So
most
about
you
5 or
get
6
5 years.
That's done. Then they move in
Yeah,
something
which-
completely brand new and different.
On a bright side of that though, Dustin, the elementary school's been using EasyCBM data for quite a number of years. Doesn't correlate as well as we would like to who's gonna pass Smarter Balance test, but at least we have some data sets that we can look at growth for individual kids or for instructors, because we've had it long enough. And so we rely on that quite a bit. Not perfect, but at least we have quite a
It's
bit
an
of it.
indication.
Yeah.
So this group of testing we've only done for 2 years.
Yeah.
So you can't take these kids that are freshmen now and see what they tested as 6th graders.
No. It'd be
And
apples.
fifth graders,
As far as
'cause
the
it's
test model,
different.
it would be apples. Comparing the test models.
So sorry to hijack it, Tara.
No, you're fine.
I'm a statistics person.
And I'll make a note that next year when we have 3 years, we can look at some of that stuff. High school, like we said, they kind of stand alone all by themselves, because the last time they tested was in 8th grade, it was an Oaks test, it was a different test.
Yeah.
They were able to meet the target of 57%, 60.8% of them were proficient on the English Language Arts test, which was wonderful. They were a little below the state average, but they were still on target, so that was good news for our report card. Just a little summary with some of the highlights from that data. For our elementary, 50% of the grade levels were above the state average. Didn't have anybody meet the target, but some of them were really, really close. 3rd grade had the largest percentage of students proficient, 54.4%. There were 9.2 above the state average and 2.6 below the target, so they just barely missed it. 5th grade was the lowest percentage proficient at 46.9, but when you compare them to that 3rd grade, which was the highest, you can see there's not a lot of difference there. They were 6% below the state average and about 10% below the target. Middle school, we had 1 grade level above the state average and 1 grade level who met the target. That was the 8th grade. There was a 2.5% increase in proficiency from the previous year, and they exceeded the target by 1.3%. And then there was 7th grade. They were 21% below the state average and 22.4% below the target. So it'd be interesting to look at 7th grade too next year. And high schoolers met the target at 60.8. They were 8.6 below the state average, but they still were 3.8% above the target. Which moves us on to the report card. You might be thinking she just went over all the data. Shouldn't that be what's on the report card? Yes and no. Yes, but what happens with the report cards is it's a school report card. So when you're looking at that data for ELA, it's by grade band in a lot of cases. So when you're looking at, like, say, Fremont Hayes report card, they give me a percentage proficient for 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th all lumped together. So that's one reason it's different. The other reason it's different is because if you want to look at grade level data individually like we just did, you have to get it from the Oregon Department of Education. They calculate it based on all the kids who are enrolled in our district first school day in May. That's who they put in the calculation. When they do the report card, they don't do it that way. They look at that, but the kid also has to have been here for a full academic year, so at least half of the school year. So they're different numbers of students they're calculating. So sometimes when you look at the individual grade level data, which I just bring to you, it's not on the report card, you might see it's usually just a difference of 1 to 2%, and that's why, just heads up. So Fremont Hay report card data, overall, this year was 50.5% is what they reported for students proficient. When you take a look at that percentage, compare it to the state and like schools, so schools with similar demographics, similar class sizes, you can see this yellow bar, I couldn't get it to go down, looks a lot higher than those, but pretty much they're all exactly the same, 50.5, 50.4. Gotta love Excel and PowerPoint. So still pretty much on par with how everyone else is performing. There was a drop between the last 2 years, but again, it wasn't the exact same students. Some of them moved up to middle school. We're looking at different kids. Union report card. Union 53.8% of those elementary kids showed up as proficient on the ELA assessment. It's really kind of neat to look here and see how much growth Union had, because if you look at 15, 16, 23.8% of those kids were proficient, the grade bands they had there at that time. So that's like 30% growth. That's excellent. So then you can take a look and compare that to the state and like schools. They performed above the state average. They were still below like school, but with that amount of growth, I think that's still really great news. And they were fairly close to the target too. Middle school, when you put 7th and 8th together, they have 45.8% students proficient. It was a drop from the previous year. This report card, which was set 57.9, didn't quite meet the target. And you compare it to Oregon and like schools, it's below, not by a huge amount, but it is. We are performing slightly below those two areas. And then the high school report card, 64.6% were proficient. It's below the state average and below the like school average, but it is meeting the target of 57%. And that's it for English language arts, and moves us into math. Did you guys find if I just go right into math? Or?
What did the teachers think of these numbers?
Well, for math, a lot of the teachers aren't here, but for English language arts, one of the teachers at the middle school level is no longer here. I think Lisa was okay with her results, but they were pretty good. She had the 8th grade class.
Well, and those 8th grade results, she had a big group of those in her last year as a 6th grade teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did. She's had them for
Twice.
which is beneficial. And at the elementary level, everyone.
In English language arts.
Yeah.
The RTI model that we've been using, they feel like the interventions are working well, and I'm going to talk about that when we get to our little principal piece of that. But there's some extraneous factors that we need to address. We're spending quite a bit of money out of the House Bill 3499 grant on math this year, but the state of Oregon we don't have these kinds of test results when we're doing our professional development planning in the spring, because we don't get a lot of this until late spring, summer. And so we'd already planned to do another year of math this year and push on math. And then next year, we're going to turn our focus back around. The staff would like to back to English language arts and do some additional training, because we've been focused on math for a while.
Back to what I was referencing earlier. If we ever get to the day of having more than 2 years, 4 years, 5 years of data, it'd be interesting to put that on a timeline and see what those percentages do and highlight the areas or the time period in which we implemented something new. And I'm going to say avid, not that I think avid will cause negative results, or hopefully it's going the other way, positive results.
Mm-hmm.
But when we implement it, you would expect, on a new program, you would expect to start seeing results increasing, or textbook adoption or something else, or RTI focus, or some sort of new program that comes up, and put that on that timeline and see, are we starting to see some increases in that one area, or, is that program maybe not buying us anything, or if it's not, is it the program or is it some other factor outside of that? And it could create some very interesting dialogue. I don't know that we'll ever get to the point of having enough data.
Well, we do at the elementary school because every quarter, we split into grade level groups for an hour and a half, and they go through their data from these other progress monitoring tools that collect data, and they have discussions about kids that are high risk for not being able to read, low risk, and some risk. And then interventions are designed for those kids to target the exact skills that they need. Those interventions are reviewed and the data every 6 weeks to shift those kids where they need to be. And so we're not willing to abandon that process, even though the state of Oregon says, we have some fluctuation, because we know we're getting the results that we need by the time we get to that 5th, 6th grade year. So the system works well for us in looking at that data and analyzing it. It was a big mind shift for teachers, though, to use data-driven decision making. So.
I think it's great. I've been on that side of it too,
Yeah.
with the kid, and, it's very nice to see, the progress, and sometimes that line gets pretty steep when the progress is high.
Ready to move on? Participation for math, pretty much the same story because we tested pretty much the same kids in math. We did have some kids leave during the test window because we usually give English language arts first, it's a longer test, and then they do math second. So sometimes kids move and then they go to California where they don't have to take this test or it's not reported back to us. So some of the percentages for grade levels might be slightly lower than they were for English language arts, but we met the target every single grade level in the school district, and we were above the state average in every single grade level in the school district. So participation was good for math too. Elementary results, 3rd graders took this test. The target was 47% and 61.4% of those kids were proficient on that exam. So they did really well. The state average was 45.8%, so they were well above that. So really good math scores. 4th grade, 53.6% of those students were proficient. Again, they met the target of 47%. They were above the state average by almost 10%. There was a slight drop between the 3rd grade test takers from 61.1 to 53.6, but still on target and still above the state average for math. 5th grade, a little bit of growth between the two, not probably enough to be noticeable because we probably had some different kids in there, but 49.2% of 5th graders were proficient on the math test, which exceeded the target and exceeded the state average of 39%. Starting to see a trend here in the elementary math, they're doing really good. 6th grade, 48.1% of the 6th graders were proficient, so they exceeded the target as well, and the state average, which was 39.5%, and they also showed some growth between the last 2 years. Brings us to middle school. Target still 47%. 7th graders who took that test last year, 23.1% were proficient. The year before, as 6th graders, 31.5% were proficient, so there was a drop there. Across the state, 42.4% of 7th graders were proficient. 8th grade, kind of the same deal, went from 44.2 to 16.7, and the state average was 40.8%. So we were unable to meet the target in middle school. And we had some pretty good ideas for part of the reason that happened. And I'll let Rusty talk to you guys about that.
We had obviously a shift in our math program, hire someone basically after school starts, then hire someone a little bit later than that. So we had no continuity in our math program.
We'll hire someone again 3 times.
Yeah. So what we're hoping to have now is a middle school math teacher's going to be here for a while and be able to build the program and have consistent delivery of education in that grade levels.
So with this, these kids are now 9th grade
Yes.
kids. We've identified that the continuity within the program may have caused a decrease in their abilities here from where they should be. Are we doing anything now for them as 9th graders to try to bring them back up?
We actually have a couple interventions that we're doing. One is an essentials class for kids that need that extra help. And another one is a study skills class for those kids that are low achieving. And we have some of those kids identified in those classes, getting extra help that way. Also because of the grant that the elementary and the high school are sharing with a math coach, basically, has come in and already observed and then met with our teachers. We're trying to get kind of some consistent delivery ideas across our curriculum from them, and that seems to help. And our math essentials teachers are involved in that also. So we are doing some interventions, and like just today, our math department met on goals and trying to get more of a department-wide goal on how we attack this. So it's definitely on our radar, and we're trying to address it.
I think that's great. I mean, I think it's great to have data to try to figure out why.
Yeah.
And what can be done.
So if you take this group of kids, because I happen to know this group of kids, and I don't know if there's more than just Mr. Louie teaching freshman math. That's the only one that I know of, but I only have one
think he may
child.
be the only one, or we may have somebody else teaching up here. I think it's him.
So I'm kind of curious, is he taking this data and is he having to change his mainstream
No.
class to get these kids to be able to continue to function, especially in math where you continue to build on?
No, I don't think he's changed necessarily what he does, but we've identified, going into their 9th grade year, we identify what classes they should take as freshmen. And he has a large say in that. He gets their test results and looks at it, and he talks to the teacher they had. And then we put them in the classes we think that they need to be in order to close that gap.
Right.
And that's why some of them are in the math essentials and some are in the study skill classes and working on getting extra math out.
Extra math.
Yep.
So we test again at not until 11th
11th
grade.
grade.
So unfortunately now,
And lots
we've
of things happen.
identified an issue.
Mhm.
We've implemented what we could see as a fix, and we won't know the results until it's probably too late.
In some ways, as far as the test goes, but we do, and our staff just worked on today, student learning goals, in which they identify certain things that they want kids to get out of a class. And they go by a class set then, so it may be an Algebra 1 class that student learning goal comes from, and we get data from that to see, did we meet that student learning goal as a teacher? And that tells us a lot of information of whether we're on track to get to where we need to be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I guess I kind of spoke thinking, this really isn't the only test that we ever do.
no.
There's so many other little pieces
Yeah.
there, but from a true apples to apples
Yeah,
standpoint.
yeah, it's gonna be,
stuff,
well, that's if that same test is
issue.
around. And remember that different levels of these tests exist, and at certain levels, they get much more difficult, or kids have time to get these skills, to get that. Now, my guess is that last year when the 8th graders tested, they did not have all the skills necessary to do well in the test. And now they're in catch-up mode. Luckily, they got 3 years to catch up. But a lot of things can happen in that too, a student has a gap in taking math, that happens sometimes, and so it can skew the results a little bit. But, a lot of times for teachers, what happens, especially like a veteran like Mr. Louie, who's been around a while, taught the same classes for a while, he's gonna be able to tell, are these kids where my last classes have been? How are they doing on that? And that's the data that's not necessarily written down, but he can tell. So then, and of course, we're doing some interventions to try to give our teachers help and our students help to get them caught up. So.
Well, and if you have somebody like him who's teaching the same class and he's teaching it the same way that he always does, and, most of his class is getting C's and D's, then you know that those kids are far behind in where they need to be.
11th grade, 29.4% students were proficient in math, did meet the target. State of Oregon, 33.9% were proficient. So you can see that across the state, they're well below the target as well. And as long as I've been here, that seems to be a trend for 11th grade. I feel like when you just look at the state scores, we're always quite a bit below the target they have in place. I think that's a problem we're having not just here, but everywhere. Math summary, elementary, really great results, 100% above state average for everybody, and 100% of the grade level is above the target. Third grade was again the highest scoring grade overall, 61.4% of those kids were proficient. They were 15.6% above the state average, 14.4% above the target, Sixth grade was the lowest percentage proficient, but they were still 8.6% above the average for the state and 1.1% above the target. Talked about middle school a little bit already. We know we were below in both of those areas. Seventh grade performed a little bit better than eighth grade, but they were 19.3% below the state average and 23.9% below the target, and then eighth grade 24.1% below the state average and 30.3% below the target. In high school, pretty close to the state average, just 4.5% below, but still 17.6% below the target, which seems to be about where juniors are performing across the state. Which brings us to our report card data. Fremont Hay report card, again, the target was 47%. We came in at 52.5%. That was an increase from last year. When you look at that in comparison to Oregon and like schools, you can see we exceeded in both of those areas. So Fremont Hay is doing really well for math. Union, more of the same thing. Again, a huge amount of growth even on the report card. They went from 23.8% of students proficient in math to 57.7%. They're outperforming in those grade levels at the state level and in like schools as well. Met the target. Middle school, we had that drop. We've talked about that. It averaged up to 19.8 being proficient. And then you can compare that to like schools in Oregon and see that we were below that. So hopefully some of these things that we're doing this year for these kids will bring that back up. And then high school, totally different group of kids than last year, but knowing those two groups of kids is pretty comparable, 37.8%, 31.3%. I think they probably did about the same on that test. They didn't meet the target. They were below the state average, but we did outperform schools that were similar demographics and similar class sizes to us, so that was a good thing. And that is it. I would talk a little bit about our science results, but I just have those on the report card, which you guys have in your packet.
What's our average class size? Is it about 60?
At the high school level?
Yeah.
It's pretty varied, as far as
Or grade.
the grade size, yeah. It goes from, our juniors are a big number, they're almost 80, almost, like 70, high 70s, to most of the rest of them being somewhere between 55 and 60.
I guess that was one thing you mentioned it, but 60 kids, 5% difference is 3 kids. And we probably in each grade, we probably average 2 to 5 kids a year coming in and out. Is that, or more, maybe?
Or more.
Because 1 or 2 opt out and it brings it down to like 96% sometimes.
So really the relevance of those numbers is probably not something to pay a lot of attention to
But it does
until
give you
we're pushing
trends.
that 10% level or higher.
Yeah. And then, as word gets out that people can opt out, and I know in the school I was in previous, more kids were looking at opting out. It seemed to be our higher achieving kids that were opting out, so we were getting results that were not indicative of the entire school. There seemed to be one demographic especially, and
What's the rationale for opting out?
they still want that.
Well, I don't want to do a lot of things, but
You sound like my mom.
There's kind
I've
of,
heard that a time or two in my life.
there's kind of a thought out there, a lot of people do not like the Common Core, and they see these tests being married to the Common Core, and so Common Core was kind of a political hot potato during the presidential campaign.
Right.
So if I were to assess probably some of the causes, probably the Common Core and the test being related to the Common Core will probably be in that somewhere. I'm not going to say that's totally it, but I'd say it's part of it.
well, the interesting thing with that math and like that 8th grade group, I think, and I'm not positive if it was that group's 6th grade year that they started doing math weird. I think it is the first year that we had to try and make sense of what was happening there. And so it's kind of interesting in that regard that they didn't get this new way of thinking in math until they were already 6th graders. If some of that is part of where
You
those
look at-
numbers are.
Like, for instance, the third graders,
Well, they started
and they're starting.
earlier with, they
So
don't.
do you wanna address that real quick?
You can see by the scores, even though we have some issues as far as relevance, that it is working. And it was a huge shift and it was a huge political battle. We had town halls, we visited with parents, but the application pieces that we're asking our students to do and drawing pictures and writing about and explaining how they answered a question is working. And that's exactly what's happening is those third grade kids have now had this for three years since kindergarten. And they are able to perform on these tests better than those folks that didn't get it. They got 1 year of math to some extent because the sixth grades always had a different math curriculum than K through 5. We've always made that break between 5 and 6 at Fremont. Hey, and then Union's kind of done that as well. And so those teachers at the elementary school have committed to this, and it's paying off for them. But they had to realign how they were thinking and how they were teaching math, and it just took a lot of work. So.
Well, and then you get into the reason maybe people are contemplating this because the way that math is being taught now fits how this test thinks, not necessarily how you really do math. I mean, you do math this way now, but you still can do math a more logical way, in my opinion, and get the same answer.
It's my understanding that this will help them do better though on the SAT test that they need to perform well on to get into a college. Not in real life, maybe, Corey, when we're trying to balance our checkbooks.
Well,
and make
or-
those applications at different times.
That, and you know, where I see it just on a personal level is when you're trying to help with homework, good luck. You know, I got an equation and I got an equal sign and I do the same thing on both sides of my equal sign. And I come up with the answer and Logan looks at me like I have completely lost my mind, and then he starts drawing little boxes and I'm like, what are you doing with that? And eventually he'll come up with the same answer, but it's just a completely different thought process. So if those kids are being tested on how that works, and they didn't start trying to think about math until they were sixth graders that way, that in itself could be part of why these test results are so poor.
Tara, how does the state of Oregon compare to other states?
I don't know, I've never been given that data.
Because it's not just Oregon.
It's kind of all over the board though. A lot of those states that were originally gonna do Smarter Balance, they got at the last minute and said they're not gonna do it and are gonna come up with
So
their
it's
own.
not-
There are some states that are doing Smarter Balance. I remember when, years ago when we looked, they had that whole map and it showed a bunch of them. I know a lot of them are no longer doing it, but then they don't even have this, you know, they have to come
They
up
don't have
with
a
their own,
state
they don't even have anything at
So
all.
the test is set up to though that, where like, for example, 57%, that's what,
It's Oregon's target.
yeah, but is the test set up that way to where that's acceptable? I mean,
Because you
No,
would
the-
think
The test is,
a 57% is failing, right?
Yeah,
well,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're only getting 5.5 right out of 10,
and
The target-
19.8 is
Yeah.
not even,
But
the
that
target's
test is-
irrelevant to the test itself,
Target's
as far
irrelevant.
as a kid, like the scores they mail home to the parent, would
it's
be
hard to
different.
decipher some of this if we're,
Mhm.
Yeah, the 57% target is the number of kids that are proficient.
right, so out of 100 kids,
Yeah.
57 of them are proficient.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that 57% on the test means you've met the target. That target is how many kids are proficient
They say
on the test.
we should have at least 57% of our kids proficient on that test to be on track to get to the 80%.
but what is proficient on the test?
Like a level 4, it's not a percentage, it's like, there's 4 levels, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 3 and 4 are on track for college and career readiness, and 1 and 2
So it's
are
at
not.
least 75% of that.
Sort of,
Sort
but
of, but they don't, it's not, they don't make it that simple.
when you get those test results back, because these are the ones that the parents get
Mhm,
back,
yeah,
right?
the ones that you got.
You look at them and you're just kind of, well, I guess it's okay, it says you're proficient, but I'm thinking
The
you better be
descriptors
better
are
than
poor.
proficient to survive in life, but, because proficient doesn't really look like it's that great.
great report.
It almost creates more questions than it does
Yeah.
answers.
That's what I feel.
As a teacher, I'm frustrated by the data because I feel like we're talking about kids. There are, 1,000 variables. Did the kid have a bad day that day? Did they eat breakfast? Did they not? Did they go to bed at 2 in the morning? Did they learn the material? How did they learn the material? Who was their teacher? What, 1,000 things. And yet, we're supposed to take the data and then draw some concrete, absolute something from it. And personally, I don't see how I can do that. We're talking about kids, they're all different. They all learn at different levels. I mean, do you have an expectation that at some point they would learn it? Yes. But there's always that exception. And so for me, the data I just go in circles because I don't feel like there's any absolute with it that you can for sure draw.
So maybe we need to take some of those variables out, and for the week prior to the test, they have to stay in their classroom 24/7.
Then you get a whole different
You can make sure they go to sleep
variable.
all at the same time and eat breakfast.
Then you get a whole different variable.
The thing that Logan likes about it is none of the classes give homework in that week.
Well, sure.
Because you're supposed to be resting up for this test.
Keep your brain clear.
Okay, let's keep moving unless you guys got anything else.
I think she had some science.
I was gonna share science with you guys. There isn't a target for science. I don't know what their rating system is gonna look like when they come up with their report cards, how they're gonna rate schools. In the past, they reported science on their report card, but didn't use it to rate schools, but we still give the test in 5th, 8th, and 11th grade, so it's on every single report card. So the report cards are in your packets, I think page 61, but I can just tell you. Fremont Hay report card looks like this. It's gonna be the same page you see for every single school. All your summary data is right up here at the top. English language arts, math, and then science at the bottom. So for Fremont Hay, when they're talking about science, they're really talking just about 5th graders, because they're the only ones that took the test. So this year, 67.2% of 5th graders were proficient on the test. Across the state, 66% of 5th graders were proficient on the test, so we were above the state average. When you look at like schools, they said 69% of students or 5th graders were proficient. So it's pretty comparable results there. Then we had some 5th graders at Union. Remember, this is probably, I think it was 5 kids, but they reported them. That's on page 64. 85.7 of those kids, 85.7% were proficient, so they did really well. That well exceeded the state average, which was still 66%. When you look at schools similar to Union, 82.2% of students were proficient, so they were a little bit above that, so good results there too. Middle school, page 67, 75.6% of the 8th graders were proficient on that test, so that was really good. And the state average was 62.8%, so they were quite a bit better, but same group of kids. And then like school average was 70.8%, so they exceeded in both areas, so again, good science results. Which honestly, ever since I've been here, we usually do have good science results at every grade level.
Yeah.
High school, 61.2% of the juniors were proficient. In Oregon, 57.8% of juniors were proficient. And like schools, 57.2% were proficient. So our 61.2% put us above both of those areas as well. And this is still the Oaks test, but they're looking at giving us a new test. So it's kind of weird because the teachers are teaching the next generation science standards, and the test is still aligned to the 2009 science standards. So keep that in mind, but they're doing really well on that test, so.
I think it's noteworthy at the elementary school. I don't know exactly where they're at the high school, but the state of Oregon considers kids to be chronically absent if they miss more than 10% of school. And our absenteeism rate at Fremont Hay right now is 79.5. So we have a lot of kids that aren't coming to school. So we have 21% of our kids, 21% chronically absent, which we've targeted and do monthly letters or phone calls to try and get that percentage up to 90, where we've got way less kids that are chronically absent. The second piece of it is that 59% of our student population at the elementary level is on free and reduced lunch and considered economically disadvantaged. That's huge. And it just continues to go up higher and higher and higher, which means your teachers are dealing with more and more social issues and poverty issues in trying to get these kids to where they need to go. I think the high school teachers are dealing with a lot of the same things, but your high school kids won't. Their parents won't fill out the applications most of the time.
Yeah, the numbers tend to drop from.
Yeah, they do.
High school, every district, kids have more freedom, they don't use the lunch program as much, so those numbers drop, but we would suggest that ours are probably at the same level. And we're seeing some of those same chronic attendance issues at the high school. And in fact, we just made a list today of kids that will be called every time they're home. Those parents will be called. And we've already sent a round of letters out. Maybe not to the point where we've cited one. So we're having that same issue with kids just not being there. And it's really interesting. I've noticed and this is not anything that's necessarily data driven, other than observations. The kids that come from the higher poverty, when they get sick, tend to stay out longer than kids that don't come from poverty.
So those are two interesting statistics that would be interesting if we can get a string of data to overlay with, to see our test scores dropping while our free and reduced lunches are increasing and our attendance is dropping. It's.
Okay, so I like some of the statistics too, and I pulled them the other day for free and reduced lunch, and I showed them to Will. And the first year that they started collecting that data was 98, and it's just gone from like that 44% rate, and now it just keeps creeping up a little bit more all the time. And I looked it up, Barry, and Oregon ranks 38th.
Okay.
Not just in academics, but school funding as well, a couple different criteria. So.
Okay.
So I know for some this can be a very boring presentation, but I love it. I love the statistics.
Tara needs that affirmation too, because she loves her numbers.
It was riveting, Tara.
But I do appreciate your guys' dialogue that you've obviously had in your own groups and within the school to try to identify, what's driving some of these changes in the numbers. I think that's important. Even though we don't only have 2 years of data, but we have some other testing along the way. I think that's awesome.
And I'll make a note, because I don't see you guys once a year, but to maybe we'll have 3 years, we'll look at, I'll go back and look at some of those areas where we weren't quite so pleased and see what was good, just so we can look at it.
And please don't take offense to boring.
Hey,
it's statistics. Either you love
I'm not
it or you don't.
offended at all.
Well, the remainder of the stuff that's in your packets that are on your computer are the actual physical report cards that are going to go out. Each one of us has to prepare one. I have to prepare one on behalf of the district. There are some statistics in there for you to look at and review. And I think the one thing that Susan made mention of is the attendance and the enrollment factor. And district profile right here. And here is the enrollment and the demographics, the total enrollment for all the buildings. And here's the regular attenders, K3 78.7, grades 4-5 84.3, 6-8 76.3, and 75.2. So that's gone down since I was a principal. So we've got to really work collectively as a group and try to get that attendance level back up. But it's not unique to Lake County School District 7. You read things in OSBA, you read things in COSA, and it is a statewide problem. So much so that it was talked about in the state legislature. The state legislature didn't really come up with any real solutions, but however, part of the drive to Measure 98 is, at risk and getting students to attend. So that's, if we wanted to, we could use 98 as a function of that too. But right now we've got it, of course, targeted for everything along the road through this year. And then we have the median class sizes. That's good data. In our elementary self-contained classrooms, our number there is the average of 25, and then it shows you the average numbers in ELA, mathematics, science, and social studies. And I'm just going to hit this real quick. This chart, ethnicity, white, Hispanic, etc., African American. Our per pupil spending. Interesting, state, 2016-17, $11,350. $11,857. Well, excuse me, for our district, state $11,822 per pupil. It talks about funding sources. I guess the one golden gem of this thing, you look at the amount of expulsions and suspensions like we had last year. We did not have a single expulsion last year, which was great. So, and the rest of my report is just strictly all that testing that you already seen. So, Rusty or Susan, is there anything you want to profile in your report cards?
No, I just wanted to talk about the attendance and the,
Okay.
and the other, that's all.
That's it. That's a lot of stuff actually.
59.
Did the,
Thank you.
from 98 to that first?
I did
So-
for every year, but I haven't been
We'll move to 9.3.
Yeah, I'm pleased to welcome Christy Albertson. We're having a teen health fair. And myself, the principals, attended the planning meeting this last week. And I invited Christy to come down and tell you all about it, so
All about it.
go for it, Christy. Those are tough crowds, right?
No. So I'm Christy Albertson, I'm Barry for the other two. I'm the grant writer for Lake Health District. And this teen health fair, I'm really excited about. I'm not quite sure how I ended up here and coordinating all the things, but I'm coordinating all the things. So Lake Health District, and under that banner, that includes the Wellness Center, the Mental Health Department, and our Prevention Department, and Lake Health Clinic, and then a couple of other people as we pull them in. It's partnering with Warner Mountain Medical Clinic and the school district, and Lake County Mental Health, or Public Health, Food Corps, which is similar to AmeriCorps. I don't know if you guys had a chance to meet Rochelle Hansen when she was here last year. We have a new Food Corps service member who is working primarily in the elementary schools on nutrition-related, school garden-related topics. But all of these different entities are working to put this teen health fair on. And the background on this, Eastern Oregon Coordinated Care Organization, which handles Medicaid for Lake County and 11 other Eastern Oregon counties, had an opt-in grant opportunity that we were chosen to participate in. And the target of this health fair, the goal is to increase the number of Oregon Health Plan Medicaid kids who are seeing their primary care provider for an annual wellness visit. The CCO has set a target, I think last year's target was 29% of these Oregon Health Plan kids getting in to see their provider for just an annual checkup. And Lake County was about half of that. So the goal of this is really to encourage those appointments and start establishing that relationship with their healthcare provider. You guys know as well as I do that Lake County, our attitude toward healthcare is generally, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we're trying to be a little more proactive as far as that goes and get people to see prevention and wellness as a sign of strength and as a positive thing instead of just a waste of money. So that's the long backstory of this. So the health fair, we are going to be at the middle school, as you can see, on November 15th. We're going to have different stations. This is modeled after a much lauded event that Baker County put on. Baker County set up theirs, and this was our original plan as well. Baker County got the two major healthcare providers, St. Luke's and St. Alphonsus, to get their doctors to not do sports physicals. Instead, the kids have to do an adolescent well-care visit, which is everything a sports physical would entail, plus a few more depression screening and a little more in-depth one-on-one with your doctor. We wanted to do kind of a similar setup, but we've modified it a little bit. So what our fair is gonna look like, we will have different stations. We're gonna have an immunization station. Public Health is going to offer flu shots and standard vaccines. And the timing wise, as far as offering the fair now, it's really perfect. Did we say January is when the cutoff date is? If you're not immunized, then you're.
That's when we start sending the letters for the February exclusion date.
Okay. So this is a perfect chance for the kids who are gonna be 7th graders next year to get the Tdap and to hit any kids who are at risk of being kicked out of school early next year. because they're not up to date on their vaccines. So we'll have vaccines there. Public health is also going to have a healthy relationship station. We can't call it a contraception station. We're not going to be throwing condoms around. It's not that kind of setup, but it's the idea of talking to kids about choices and really thinking about relationships and what your choices in relationships might do down the road. The Crisis Center is involved in this. They are going to just make kids aware of what their services are. I'd like to keep our heads in the sand and not think that they might not need those services, that Crisis will be there to let them know those services are available. Our food corps service member is going to have nutrition information. She is also going to be running the blender bike, which is the thing I'm most excited about. You pedal a bike and it'll blend a smoothie for you. We're borrowing that from Oregon State University Extension, so that will be a fun opportunity for the kids. Who am I missing? Mental health is going to be there. They're going to be doing depression screenings. It's a questionnaire, and I don't know all of the questions that are on it, but just a chance to check with kids. This is something that's part of that adolescent welfare visit, and this is a piece that they can get checked off once the kids fill out the depression screen form. Then that information will be shared with their primary care provider. Prevention will be there. Francie Winters, our prevention coordinator, is going to have the goggles that you can wear to simulate drunk driving. The kids will be on tricycles or following a map or something, but she'll be talking about drug and alcohol prevention. And I feel like I'm missing someone. Oh, and then they'll have a station. We will have someone from Lake Health Clinic and someone from Warner Mountain Medical Clinic there to actually schedule kids to get in to see their primary care provider. So once the kids go through these stations, they're going to have a passport, and they'll get stamped off at each of their different locations. And then the final stop is to check out, and at the checkout, they will receive a fabulous prize. I ordered a bunch of aluminum water bottles earlier this week with the cool logo. And then they will be reminded that to get the next step, the next fabulous prize, they have to follow through and actually go see their primary care provider. When they do that, they will get a t-shirt with that Outback Strong logo that's on the bottom of that. They'll get a hooded sweatshirt with that. And they will be entered to win an even more fabulous prize, which will be their choice. They can enter to win a bicycle or a season ski pass or 10 rentals through whatever Megan Buddy Mess called the ski and snowboard rental business. So, what else do I need to tell you about? That's kind of it in a nutshell. We're also going to have, because we're hoping for high attendance, and because we only have 8 official stations, we try to account for keeping all of these kids occupied for 2 hours. Lakeview Rocks is going to be there. I talked to Christy Gray yesterday, so Lakeview Rocks will be there to keep them occupied. Kristen Hill is going to run a health trivia game for us. We're going to have a photo booth. We'll have snacks because we're right after school and we need to feed hungry teenagers. And the youth mentors are going to run a live Hungry Hungry Hippo game, which I'm most excited about, and you should absolutely get in on. You're going to ride the little square scooters that have no purpose outside of PE, and you're on that on your stomach, and another kid pushes you in. You've got a bucket, and you're trying to collect the balls. It's going to be cool. It's awesome. They'll be wearing helmets. So that's
We're a
it
team,
in
though.
a nutshell.
So,
You're on the scooter.
I'm really looking forward to that.
as far as this goes, is that gonna be something that within the school, they say at this period, you're gonna go do this, cause it's 1:30?
It's an early release day, sorry.
So what'll happen is that actually the 6th graders are coming over at the 1:30 because that's what time they get out on their early release day. And our kids will transition there when they get out of school.
Oh, okay.
And it's not something that the schools are requiring. We're not
Right.
requiring our kids to do it. It's an option for them to go do.
That's why we have the fabulous prizes, to incentivize them to actually show up. I should say too, so the Crisis Center and the mental health screenings, because those are more sensitive topics, we're going to place those not in the gym itself. The choir room and the computer lab, is that what we talked about in the middle school? But anyway, have those 2 stations out a little bit so that there's a little bit more privacy for those kids and to make room for Hungry Hungry Hippos.
So are parents gonna have to be involved if you're doing immunizations?
We're going to be at parent-teacher conferences. Someone from each of the clinics and from public health is going to be at conferences both days to schedule appointments and to sign consent forms. If you're 15 and older, you don't have to sign a consent form, but everybody 14 and younger will need to have parental consent.
Good for immunization.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the 6th grade level, we felt it was important those kids all have permission slips going out to them explaining what was going on. And then Rusty drafted a similar letter explaining all of this, so there's some parent information going out to them that you guys need to know is going out to them. But 6th grade, we required a permission slip, just so that those could be collected, put them in a group so they can all walk up to DMS together. Because we really would like to cut down on those kids that leave campus and go up there and don't have parent permission, and then the parent, makes the phone call to me later that their child went and did a depression screening and, they didn't know about it, so.
So is this information going out to all parents? Like somehow, like letters or something?
You guys have sent it out to everyone. I have more flyers, if anybody wants to hand out more, there are gonna be posters around town.
Mine haven't gone out yet, but they're all
But they're going
drafted.
to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our information hasn't gone out yet. We're gonna
Okay.
disseminate that information through our English classes, but it's really not a school activity.
Right.
It's a, like, health,
Activity.
it's happening at
school.
the school. So
Right, so the first part of that says, what did we decide, Rusty? We're hosting.
we are hosting an event.
Okay.
Yes,
We're playing
that was
host.
amazing.
There's something like that one.
But the facilitator is an organization.
Did you put all this together?
Done, all of these organizations have really contributed.
That wasn't the question.
Yeah, trying to get it all.
She's worked a lot on it.
So,
It's been good. Can I make a quick plug while I'm up here for Outback Strong too? So, outbackstrong.org, if you guys have a chance and surf the web. This was born out of grant dollars through the Eastern Oregon Coordinated Care Organization too. There is the perception in Lakeview that the hospital is slowly taking over everything. And the idea behind Outback Strong is it's a campaign, frankly, it's a ripoff of the Live Strong campaign from a few years ago, the Lance Armstrong campaign. We wanted something that all of Lake County could buy into. This isn't a Lake Health District project. I am the one coordinating it, but it's bigger than that. It's really the whole county. So the school district can buy into Outback Strong. It can be a public health thing. OSU Extension offers several education, fitness, wellness type programs. It's something that they can buy into. Food Corps is a part of it. We're running several other, this is just one of several, the summer food program, we ran that as an Outback Strong program. We're doing colorectal cancer screening, another opt-in grant. We're doing a project through this program. We have a lot going on. But the heart of it, it seems like we all operate in our own little kingdoms, our own little silos. So this is something that we can all buy into. Building off of the We Live in Oregon's Outback idea, that we've been marketing for however many years, at least since I was in high school, that Lake County is the Oregon Outback. And then the idea that who doesn't want to be strong? And historically, that is something that we value here, the idea of strength, which is kind of changing what we view as what is strong. So, outbackstrong.org, tell your friends, follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. The other thing I was going to mention, just
Snapchat.
so, not Snapchat. I don't know how to use Snapchat. I'm not that cool. The other piece is photos, so I said we'll have a photo booth because I don't know how to use Snapchat. Apparently there's a filter that you can get that'll have our little, I don't know, someone else is setting that up, some millennial is gonna set that up for me. But I am going to have a camera there, just so everyone knows, and consent forms for kids. So I don't know if that was something I meant to ask. I don't know if this is the venue for that, but I'm here. So I'm gonna have consent forms to use photos, on
At those
Yeah,
conference
on the-
times.
on the Outback Strong.
No,
The
conference.
kids
would be the ones signing the consent form,
But we-
you don't send them out.
Right, so I'll have those and try to be judicious, and I wanna share photos, cause I know there are situations where kids just can't be photographed, so just, so you know, I will
We'll
have a
double check
camera.
our 6th graders school-wide, but those could go with that conference time too, to
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah. That's everything I wanted to say about that. I gave you guys business cards because I'm still looking for volunteers to help corral all of these kids that we help our community up, so call me if you want to volunteer or volunteer someone to help, we'll take that. Someone who needs to run the photo booth and the snack stand. And more of these, if anyone has these, we have that.
Very good.
Let's see here.
Thanks, Christy.
Christy,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. All right, thanks, Christie. Are we done with reports?
Wrap.
Okay. Old business, 10.1, DMS extension, OBDD.
Okay, so I have a Scotia money left over, which
roughly 40,000. This is the original OBBB grant that we had gotten a while back in 2015. We're just trying to not leave money on the table. What had happened, we had an extension to October 31st to finish the one classroom, the old boardroom in the DMS building over there. So the step-up kids had a home to go to. We got it to where they could at least be utilizing over there. There was some finished work to be done, painting. And then they've got a couple of doors to put in for an office for both Ted and Jeff, which really is just constituting a door, putting in two places. So that way they have a place to kind of go take a kid there having a meltdown or, conference time, that sort of thing. So that will expend the rest of those dollars. But they were rushed right at the very end, and we needed to have the classroom available on September 5th. And so, explained the situation to OBDD, they were more than happy to extend us out to February 20th. However, I have told Mr. Anderson, that's still the project coordinator on this project, we needed to be done by December 31st, so that that gives me time to bill them by February 28th, given that it takes a little bit to get the bill from DCI to Anderson and to us. So I went ahead and they drafted a change to February 28th as a final drop dead date, and we would expend the rest of those funds.
You say we have 40,000 in there.
Roughly.
We're buying doors.
Well, there.
Pretty expensive doors, aren't they?
And what was that again? So there's tape and texture to finish the room.
Okay.
A tape texture and a paint job. But then there's two on the one wall. On the other side of that wall is two potential office spaces, but there's no access to them through that classroom. They have to go out and around. But they still need to have that bird's eye view of their classroom. So we knocked a hole in the wall, basically, or are going to knock a hole in the wall for a doorway, so they're right there, basically.
Okay.
I move to approve the DMS extension of the OBDD as presented.
Second.
Move to approve the OBDD as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Right.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, next topic, 10.2, resolution number 25.
So this is just a revised resolution. The dollar figures have not changed as far as on the whole. The ODE had been reconciling what I turn into them every year for a budget electronically versus my paper copy versus my resolutions. And so my proprietary funds and my fiduciary funds were commingled with special revenue funds, and they didn't really care for that very well. So they asked me to bring it back, get it readopted to separate out the proprietary funds, which is the 96,000, and the fiduciary funds, which was 5,000, and then the 33,550 and 1010. Again, the dollar figures have not changed, just a category change, basically.
Okay. Any discussion? Is there a motion?
I move to approve resolution 25, readoption as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to approve resolution number 25, readoption as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Good job. I'm never gonna do that.
New business, 11.1, lease.
Okay, so Lake County had a lease with the original COIC, Jeff Samples and Ted, or COIC, I guess is what I should say, better yet. But they have a storage, basically a storage place over on 1240 South M Street. They offered it back up to to continue that storage piece. They can do their equipment and keep things in there, do some winter time projects inside that building. And so they offered it back up. Basically, the terms are Jeff's work crews clean it up, keep it in maintenance, you know, keep the maintenance up on it and that sort of thing. We do have a Pacific Power bill that we inherited from that. I think it runs us about $10 a month, so it's really pretty.
Which building are we talking about?
It's on 1240 South M Street, Bay A.
Must be like industrial park.
Yeah.
Probably across from going to
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that is one of the projects.
That's later. So they've been working well with Jeff and Ted as far as keeping that building available to them as long as they keep it clean and the maintenance up on it. So it's kind of a trade situation, along with a power bill to it.
Any other discussion? Motion?
I move to approve the lease, especially commercial, as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the lease, special commercial as presented. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. 13, announcements.
Well, a couple things. It's looking like we're not gonna have a quorum on November 8th. So, should I poll the room? You're gone, correct? You're gone,
Yeah, unless I drive to Redmond after the meeting.
okay.
Darwin is two possibilities of him being gone, which I bet he'll be gone.
Okay, so we have no quorum. So I guess my recommendation is we have a lot of business to go.
And he's out also.
And he's out
To,
also.
yeah, she had a doctor's appointment with her child. So I guess my proposal is we set the November meeting for another date, because we do have a lot of business we have to get transacted. And keep in mind, we have one meeting in November,
One in December also.
and one in December. Thank you. So as far as recommendations, we can go back to the good old days and have it on Monday, November 13th, just throwing that out there. Want to take a look at your calendars? Ted, any issues on that?
It's a Monday, so it should be.
I looked at the school calendars, I didn't see any conflicts on the school calendars.
Oh, I think Veterans Day falls on Saturday, maybe, so it's.
Yeah, Veterans
It's
Day.
like the 10th.
Is when it's right.
Veterans Day is being observed on Friday. You think?
So our teachers are working on Veterans Day. and
The only
trading
thing
off.
that I can
that a great
say,
day?
well, it might work. You're gonna have to bump your times
No
up.
school on that day
If
because
the
it's
10th is a
Conference Makeup
holiday.
Day. Yeah, that's,
The 10th.
it's gonna get cheaper.
Do we have when the
Right,
sports?
but it's also listed as our Conference Makeup Day.
You know, we'll just have to have
Pardon
our.
me?
Since you're all sports makers.
All right, we'll have
All
to meet
sports,
that
Rusty?
meeting on Thursday.
I know none of them are on the 13th.
What's
Can you
that?
kind of give her a brief rundown on what the fall sports banquets are? I believe volleyball's on the 14th and football's on the 16th.
Volleyball's on the 14th, football's on the 16th, cross country's on the 7th. Boys soccer is on the 10th. Girls soccer has not set a date yet because they don't know what their playoff situation is yet. Cheer is on the 2nd or 3rd, 2nd, I think. I think that's everything. Okay. So my guess then is that soccer will go on the night that messes you guys up. Girls soccer.
Well, we have a quorum here, if we can go ahead and set the 13th. Once again, I don't know what to tell you. We can have a motion to set the next meeting for the 13th.
Works for me. I don't know what you guys have.
I think it would.
I'm actually worried that when we get into January, that Wednesdays aren't going to work for me very much. 'Cause Portland trips and things.
You may need to have that conversation in our work session or next
Let
week.
me get back
Because
to
right
my
now,
needs.
the one thing that I've talked to my office staff about, since this new board has been seated, we have not once had all 5 of you in the room together. So, anyway. So, I think it's a discussion topic we need to have. So,
Why don't I just waive on Wednesday the 8th? They'll let me after the meeting, just stick with it.
well, right now I have 2 other people gone too, so it's iffy. I think when we really have if we can determine a date where we're gonna have a good solid base,
I mean, Dustin and Annie are absolutely gone.
they're gone.
And we are pretty sure Darwin is
And
gonna be
Darwin's
gone.
gonna be gone.
So there's your 3 right there that'll be gone.
But
Alright.
I've done
Maybe
this
you.
policy updates before, and if you guys can have.
Oh, nice try. Sunshine. We,
I will
one of us
comment
suffers,
on
we're
the
all
same-
suffering.
Professionally, I'll stay away from
You
that.
sound so
So
I'm so ready
my
to be in your
proposal is
jeans.
go with the 13th as a special date for the board.
You inspect me? We're done.
Okay.
I look at the end of the weeks, the first week of November is a little too close. Then you run into Thanksgiving week, and then, we have a number of sports banquets in that 1 week, so that's my recommendation. I recommend a motion to that effect.
Okay.
I seem to recollect having something on my work calendar, but I do not.
So we're looking for a motion for a November meeting date.
We need a motion.
I move November 13th, but that's not for this.
You're voting.
November 13th at
Regular scheduled time.
regular scheduled time to have the next board meeting.
Is
I
there a second?
second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to have our November meeting be on November 13th at regular scheduled time. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Gary, you have to say aye too.
Aye.
There you go. You're official.
Okay.
All right, board, thank you.
That's it.
I followed it.
Sure.
There we go.
You gonna win on Friday?
Yes.
That's our plan. Unfortunately, the guy's coming from its right and direct opposition of our own. I think if we.
Very good. So how do we shut this thing off?
We're hoping,
Oh, that was out loud, sorry. Fun stuff right there.
Mrs. Warner, smile.
Cold Friday night, so.
Making an offer,
Here it is.
$100.
For them Valley teams.
no, not this one around, so she's happy.
What's the deal with ski team? Is there a coach?
I don't know.
No, you guys,
I don't know that there's a coach, and I don't know how many kids are gonna.
See at 1 tomorrow, I guess.
Going out.
We have someone there that's okay.
Thinking going out and coaching?
The lady that moved here and is working at the elementary through the hospital with nutrition. Something. But she was a skier in New Hampshire. Totally different style of skiing there, much more aggressive.
Do they have mountains there?
I think they do.
One, little one. It's a rolling
In
hill.
New Hampshire? New Hampshire's hill.
No,
Hilly.
it's hilly.
Yeah.
They're hills.
They ski slowly.
I think they do a lot of grooming.
Yeah, I've
Hey,
been there once in
Drew
the
is
summer.
from Vermont, right?
Yeah.